My name is Alan Haft. I am a second-generation Holocaust survivor. By that I mean my father was in the Holocaust. And the effects of the Holocaust didn't end when the survivors were immigrated to other countries. Many went to Israel, some went to Australia, most came to the United States. But everyone's experience of the Holocaust was different. My father's experience was especially different because, how old are you? 13? My father was 15 years old when he entered his first slave labor camp. He survived 5 years in 6 different slave labor and extermination camps, including Auschwitz. And he had to do whatever it took to survive. And the story of his survival is incredible, but I cannot say that my father survived the Holocaust, because he brought with him a lot of psychological damage. My mother, I was born in 1950. My mother was American, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And I had this father who had green numbers on his arm, could barely speak English, spoken broken English, and was prone to violent fits of rage at the drop of any hat. Every other week he was committing suicide, and I spent my childhood begging him not to kill himself. And we grew up in a family environment where I don't know how I might have misbehaved as a kid, but by today's standards, I was an abused child. I was beaten for every minor transgression, and if not for my mother, who stepped in between us many times, he may have killed me. The Holocaust, as a second-generation survivor, went way beyond just what happened in Germany. Many of the survivors brought their experiences with them. Although every survivor's story is different, some were interned in camps for short periods of time. But my father had to deal with surviving from the age of 16 to 21 in all sorts of circumstances. And because of the childhood that I experienced, most Holocaust survivors, their stories are so horrific that they didn't want to share them with their family. My uncle and my aunt were also survivors of Auschwitz. My cousins never heard a word of the story of their survival. For me, although my father wanted to tell his story, for many years I didn't want to hear the story because my mother's excuse for why he would beat me and why his behavior was so crazy was because of his experiences. And I didn't want to give him that excuse because I saw a lot of Holocaust survivors that made lives for themselves in America that didn't have these kinds of circumstances. So it wasn't until age 77 when I realized that he wasn't going to be around for very much longer that I should sit down with him and get his story. And actually, the means by which he apologized to me for treating me like that as a child was the reason why he wanted to tell me what had happened to him. In 2003, I tape recorded everything that he could tell me, and of course we were dealing with a 77-year-old, and a 77-year-old's memory at that point. So historically, there were some inaccuracies. He may have told me he went to one camp when he really was at this camp before that camp. I had a hard time publishing his story until Syracuse University stepped up and published it because they have a large Judaic studies department, and they felt it important that every Holocaust story be recorded at that particular time. Although I did have a caveat that I had to add a section from a Polish historian, which would set the historical period, and a boxing historian, which would set the context of what happened in boxing at the time that my father came to America. So that being said, Reinhard can tell you how he discovered the book and how he made it to the book that I had with Syracuse University was more like a journal of my father's experiences, and Reinhard was able to put the journal together into a cohesive story, which he really did a good job on.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. I will tell you a little bit about how I discovered the book and how I turned it into a graphic novel, and I brought some pictures with me and also some photographs that Alan sent to me when I asked him if he could send me some photo material about his father. And yeah, to begin with, this is a photo of Hertzko Haft when he was in America in his boxing career, and this photo was on the cover of the German edition of Alan's book. And I did a series of illustrations for a German magazine about the Holocaust, and I went into my favorite bookstore. See one of the pictures that I did for this magazine here. It's about the uprising in the ghetto of Warsaw. And so I went to my favorite bookstore and I saw Alan Haft's book there, and on the cover you could see it has something to do with boxing and the Holocaust, and I couldn't get these two things together, so I just bought it. And then I read the story, and I was very, very fascinated by the setup of this story, and I was thinking about turning it into a graphic novel. And then first I refused to do it because the story is quite difficult to deal with, because the main character appears not to be a nice guy, and he's also, well, the story is divided into two parts. It's first the story of the survival in the concentration camps, and then the second part is Hertzko's or Harry's career. He called himself Harry when he went to America. Harry's career as a professional boxer in America. So I was constantly thinking about that story, and then I found out that these two parts are the most fascinating things about that story. So I wrote my publishing house about what I want to do, and so they approached the Syracuse University Press, and Alan was willing to give his okay, and so I started working on the story. I have here a photo of Alan. His brother Marky is in the middle. It's from a tour that they made to the stations of his father's Odyssey. And I have some more of those pictures. I put them in
yeah, when my father died, I tried to trace some of the steps that steps that he had taken. I went to his birth town, Belko, Poland, and I went to some of the I went to the coal mine in Jaworzno, where he learned to box, where there was a slave labor camp that was a sub-camp of Auschwitz, and we visited Auschwitz, the main camp itself.
So along with these photos, there came some photos from the family archive of the Haft family, and unfortunately there are not very many photos, but it was very funny that I sent you an email if you could send me some of the photo material, and I imagined that you would scan them. but instead of that, 2 weeks later, I got a package with the original photo material and also some other material that you found that had to do with the story of the father. So here we see some of the images from this collection of photos. Unfortunately, there are not photos, any photos of the young Hertzko. The first photos are from 1948, and so I don't have photo material how he looked like when he was a boy. And this is some photos of the later period.
Sure. The left-hand photo is a photo of my mother and father when they were dating. The one in the middle is at my bar mitzvah, and the one on the right is my Uncle Peretz and my Tante Rushka, who are both Auschwitz survivors there. And I think that photo is one of my father with his friends in a DP camp, in a displaced persons camp in Furno.
This is some more photo material, but this is from their wedding, I think.
That's from my parents' wedding, yeah. And my father used to train in Coney Island. He used to run on the beach, so there you can see him in his bathing suit on the beach in Coney Island.
Yeah, which is, for me, it was very funny to see that Coney Island is a very important part in the history, because Coney Island is one of my favorite places in the world. And actually, I made a book about Coney Island, which got published in Germany. And this is a photo that was taken on their first date.
On their first date,
yeah. In a restaurant called the Long Island Supper Club. This is this photo, the history of this photo, the story of this photo, I put also into the narration of the book. When I made pictures about their first meeting in this restaurant, I picture this scene where the photographer comes and takes pictures of the young couple. And this photo actually, I don't know what is.
Yeah, my mother had never been to a nightclub, and my father really impressed her. He was out of work. He didn't have any place to live at that particular point in time. He was living with, he was a boarder in a apartment, in the same apartment building that my mother lived in. And I think he used up all his money taking my mother to a couple of nightclubs to impress her.
So this is a photo that was taken long before. It's from a boxing tournament in Munich that was organized by the Allied forces for the surviving Jewish sporters. It was not only boxing.
It was a boxing tournament that was organized by General Lucius Clay for the entertainment of the troops. It involved all Jewish boxers that survived the Holocaust, who were in displaced persons camp. Steven Spielberg found a film of the boxing tournament. And that is actually a poster that is in the Holocaust Museum in Israel announcing the boxing tournament. My father won the heavyweight My father, his story tells me, he told me that he won the light heavyweight championship and he won the heavyweight championship. But during the tournament, he had to decide which. He was 175 pounds. He wasn't a true heavyweight, but he had to decide to fight in the heavyweight division because he felt that the heavyweights attracted more attention than the lighter heavyweights.
Yeah, and in this movie, you can see these boxers fighting against each other. They don't have very much technique, but you see that there's a lot of energy.
And if you want to find it on YouTube, you Google Jewish Boxing Championship 1948, and it will come up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the only movie material that we have from Hertzko Haft. And on this photo, you already see something that became a mark of the Hertzko, that he had the Star of David printed or sewn on his boxer shorts. And somebody explained to me that this is actually a lot of Jewish boxers did that also before the war, just to show that.
Boxing in the 1940s was one minority group against another minority group. It was a way for them to sort of get out of the ghetto. So it was the Irish fighting the Jews, or the Catholics fighting the Irish. You know, as a cultural identity, most Jewish boxers did wear the Star of David on their trunks.
Yeah. This is a picture from the graphic novel that was based on the photo material or the material that I had from this YouTube video. And here we see another shot from that video. We see Hertzko sitting here in the audience watching the other fighters during a break. And on this photo, it's in the end of the movie with prize giving. And,
right, my father won a cup, but his most prized possession in his entire life was that statue of Apollo, which was given to him and inscribed to the outstanding boxer of the tournament. And my father held on to that all of his life, and then I was to get it when he died. So it's now my most prized possession.
So here's another picture from the prize giving. This is again General Lucius Clay in the middle, who's very famous actually in Berlin because he was responsible for the air bridge that was supporting the western part of Berlin while they were imprisoned by the East Germany and the Soviet forces. He's very, very famous in Berlin. And this is the set. It's I believe that it's from
my father believed it was a stolen work of art, and he thought it was a priceless stolen work of art, so he didn't want to expose it in any way because he didn't want it to go back to its original owner. But I traced it, and I traced the artist, and so I know it's not it wasn't a stolen work of art. It was just a work of art.
You don't have to give it back.
Yeah.
So after seeing all this photo material that I have, I had to do sketches and I had to find a way how to draw the character Hertzko Haft. And so I did a lot of sketches and sketches to find a way how to visualize the characters. And these are other characters from the story. This is a mafia guy, Frankie Palermo. Unfortunately, Frankie Palermo is a real mafia person, and unfortunately, too late I found photo material of that guy because he looked much, much better than my imagination. And this is a picture from a person who was called Havela. He was a Polish worker.
He was a Polish foreman who supervised the work group that my father was involved in, and he had my father stealing things from trains so that he could, that was his way of surviving in that particular work.
Yeah. And I didn't have pictures of Carrera, so in my imagination, and this is sometimes I work that way, in my imagination I already think if somebody would make a movie out of it, what actor would I pick? And so I picked a German actor, that's him, it's called David Striese, and so I make sketches of this guy, and in my mind I let this guy act as this foreman. Here are some other sketches of characters from the story that I have to mention. Hertzko's mother, Hinde, yeah. And from photo material from other sources. And here are two sketches of Hertzko. Well, the problem was that Hertzko looked different in periods of the story. So he had very curly hair, and that was very significant of his look, but I also had to, really had to recognize the person also when he has the shaved head. So I had to find really strong features of the face so that you can always recognize came across that this line of his eyebrows are very important, although they're not grown together, but the line is very, very strong in his face. So I emphasize this, and then you can easily recognize the character. This is a drawing of the SS officer Schneider, who was very important. He was he was protecting him. He was also using him as a professional fighter in this work camp.
Well, I wouldn't say professional fighter.
Professional fighter.
Yeah. My father was in Jaworzno, which was a coal mine, which was maybe 60 miles north of Auschwitz, the main camp. And every Sunday they had boxing matches for the entertainment of the SS guards. But they weren't boxing matches. Schneider kept my father, who was already big and strong, well fed. And he came to my father and he said, well, you're now going to live because you're going to be an entertainer. And my father said, entertainer? Who am I going to entertain? He says, you're going to fight, you're going to box. And he says, will I be alive after I fight? He says, yes, because you're going to win. So my father was well fed. And when he went into his first match and he looked across, there wasn't a ring, these were called finish fights. They were bare knuckle fights, and the fight was over when the other person was unconscious. And it wasn't over until then, and they were done for the purpose of entertaining the German guards. So my father, who was big and strong, would face 3 or 4 starved Jews every Sunday, whom he had to, in order to survive, practically kill with his bare hands. A newspaper, when he came to the United States, reported that he had 75 of these finish fights. And at the end of the fight, the loser was either taken away and shot or put on the next transport back to the main camp to be gassed. When my father was inducted into the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame in April of 2007, a boxing writer asked him if he had any regrets. And he went like this, and he said, the lives that passed through my hands are my regrets.
It's a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
So, well, then after I did all the sketches, I did the writing of the story and the storyline setup. And first, the story was published in a newspaper in Germany, and it was done in 111 episodes. And a lot of my friends, they did the same, and they told me, well, it's really, really nice, the response from the audience, from the readers, they read comments and everything, and so I was willing to do that, and I expected the same. But what happened was that there was almost no comments during the time when this comic strip was in the newspaper. And what happened was that afterwards, after the last episode, I got a lot of emails from people, and that was very emotional. There was some of them wrote that it reminded them of their own story, and there was one guy who told me that he was almost crying in the end because he had a long story with his grandmother going on. So for the book, I had to change the whole layout for from this strip format to the format of the novel. So what I have here is example pages of the story, and maybe we can make a quick description about what the story is. it starts in town Bechertow, which is in the middle of Poland, and Hertzko lived there with his family. They were quite poor, and then in 1938, I guess it was this part of Poland was occupied by the Nazis. Hertzko was not really educated child at that time.
Well, in 1939, a sign went up in the town. Everybody, all men over the age of 16 have to register. And registration was at the firehouse. So my father's older brother went to register, but he never came back. And when my father's mother started to worry, she sent my father to the firehouse at age 15 to look for him. Well, my father goes to the firehouse and helps his brother escape, but in the course of helping him escape, he was grabbed to replace his brother because the Nazis were very numbers. They counted everything. So they were missing one. He was 15, he wasn't 16. We'll take one, we'll fill his spot. So that was my father's start into getting caught up with the Holocaust.
This is a page from the scene that Alan was describing, and this is a photo from this firehouse.
Yeah, we happened to visit the firehouse in Goethe-Institut, and you could see the doors of the firehouse were right here. They were open doors, and I'm looking at this door because when they grabbed my father, they tried to get him to tell them where his brother was, and my father refused to speak. So they put one hand in the door, slammed the door on his hand, broke his hand, and then tried to get him to speak again. He wasn't going to tell where his brother was. They put his other hand in the door, broke his hand, and then he was put to the firehouse to await the transport to the slave labor camp. So he started the Holocaust with 2 broken hands, and my daughter Jamie, who is a 3G Holocaust survivor, probably the last generation that will personally know a Holocaust survivor, will remember my father's hands. All the knuckles on his hands were broken. His hands were just misshapen, and not necessarily a result of boxing, but the result of getting his hands broken and having to fight 75 fights with his bare fists.
I'll go back a little bit to this page because it shows something really important for the story. Right before Hertzko was deported by the Nazis, he was supposed to marry a girl that he met, was the daughter of a neighbor. They were doing some business together, smuggling, and so they fell in love with each other. And this is the scene where they both meet on the river, and they promise to marry. And right before this marriage could happen, the young Hertzko was deported. So he came into his first working camp. That's where he met this foreman, which you see on the upper side of the page. And after a short stay in this work camp, he was taken on a train and brought to Auschwitz. Another picture from the collection, so you see the same entrance to the station of the camp. And in that camp, we had to work in the crematorium where they were burning the dead bodies of the guest people, and that's a very, very
at 16 years old. Imagine having to. And the ovens were very small. I saw the ovens at Auschwitz. I don't know if anybody else has been. been there. But the ovens were very small. They didn't take many people initially, so you had to actually, on a wooden plank, 2 men would put the body into the oven to be burned. That was his job when he arrived at Auschwitz. Fortunately, when they got off the train, he was sent to the right to work. And that was his first job at age 16.
Yeah, so well, he was quite obvious he had a breakdown. He couldn't handle that anymore, and that was the moment when this officer Schneider discovered him, and he took him out of this job, and he protected him and offered him a proposal. Well, he was also doing smuggling for him. He was smuggling jewels from
the interesting thing is when he was first saved out of the crematorium, this German officer Schneider worked in Canada. Now, anybody hear of Canada and the concentration camps? Okay, Canada was...
They took the jewels and stuff off the bodies.
Right. So my father worked in Canada for Schneider, and he was given a glass bottle. And in that bottle, he was to put diamonds. So when he was working, he would fill the bottle with diamonds, take it back to his barracks, hide it in his bed, because Schneider wanted the bottle back when the bottle was full of diamonds. Unfortunately, the guards searched the barracks one day, and he was caught with the diamonds.
Yeah, but he survived, and this officer Schneider took him and told him that he wanted to use him as a professional, as a boxer against other prisoners. This is a page where you see one of the box fights, and there was in front of the houses of the officers, they set up an improvised ring, and there was also a group of musicians playing, and it was all for the entertainment of the SS officers, and so the people had to fight against each other.
Have you boxed before? One of the camps?
No.
No.
No, but he was an angry teenager. He was, the anti-Semitism in the schools, that he experienced caused a lot of fistfights between the Jewish students and the non-Jewish students in Poland. He would tell me that the teachers in Poland were very anti-Semitic, and physical punishment was not uncommon, for Jewish children attending the schools. And of course, the thing that stuck out in my father's mind was that the Polish Christians were angry with the Jews because they taught in the schools that the Jews killed Christ. So that was sort of a flashpoint for fights on the soccer fields and all those other skirmishes.
There was one of my favorite scenes from his childhood was that one of his teachers, he made a remark about that, and Hertzko just beat him.
My father got expelled from school because one of his teachers was a little bit abusive toward him, and he just punched him.
So then he was kicked out of school, and that's why he was barely able to read or write. He was not very well educated. So yeah, here's another page of those fights. They must have been really brutal. And after this camp where he was kind of protected by the SS officer Schneider, he had to leave the camp, and he was deported to another camp called Flossenburg, which is a little bit more to the west, because the Soviet army was approaching, and so they were taking the prisoners from the camps further to the west of Germany, so that the Soviet army would not free them. And Flossenbürg is one of the most horrible camps that you can imagine because there was no work for the prisoners, there was not anything to eat, and it was just a station where they gathered everybody, and it was horrible circumstances. And actually, this is a photo of this camp. I visited 2 years ago, and it's in a really beautiful surrounding. And you can see here the barracks, and they have disappeared, but this building is still there. Now there's a memorial site, and we got a scan from this memorial site where you see the name of Hertzko Haft, his brother who was with him.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that scan is that when my book was published by Syracuse University, they did no fact-checking at all. But when it went to a German publisher, they did a lot of fact-checking, you know, on the story, and that is what they turned up, you know, to make sure that he was in the places that he said he was in. You know, it was interesting that how much the German book publisher needed to make sure that the facts were as they were.
Yeah.
And I did want to say one more thing about the Flossenbürg camp, because this is something that is little known about surviving some of the camps. That a lot of the camps had no work, which meant nobody was fed, no water. So there was cannibalism, that Jews were killing other weakened Jews, and it was cannibalism, you know, for survival. And a lot of the theme of the story is, what would you do to survive the Holocaust? And, you know, that's the question that was raised. And when I heard, you know, all of what my father had to do to survive the Holocaust, I was very forgiving for all the treatment that I received.
Yeah. Although we have to say that he didn't do that. He just, there's a scene where he watched other prisoners killing somebody.
You had to stay awake at night and have a buddy, somebody who was sleeping, one person was awake, so that you were not the victim of cannibals in the camps.
Yeah, Jonny, well, after this camp, he was in some other camps, and then finally he was taken to one of those death marches where the prisoners had to walk from one camp to the other, and obviously they were not meant to survive this. Who left behind, who couldn't walk anymore, they were shot. And he managed to escape, and he found another guy who was willing to try it, and so they were just running away, and the guards were shooting at them, and they killed the other guy. And there's a scene how Hertzko survived because well, they fell. Both of them fell.
They fell into a ditch, and my father took his buddy's bloody body, put it over himself, and then when the German soldiers came over to look in the ditch, they saw there was blood all over the place. Both bodies were full of blood. They decided not to waste any more bullets, and because they thought that both of them were already dead.
So well, he managed to survive. He was somewhere hiding in the forest, trying to survive. And there was also a scene where there was the first time when I was, well, I had really problems with telling the story because it's a really brutal scene where he comes to the house of an elder couple, and he is trying to hide there. He's dressing up as an SS officer because he killed an SS officer on his way and stole the uniform, and then he came to this farmhouse where this older couple lived, and he put on the dress and pretended to be a soldier, and well, that didn't really work, and they found out, and then he killed both of them really cold-blooded, and that was well, when I was reading that that was quite a shock for me. And I said, well, I cannot tell this story, it's too horrible. But in fact, it's part of the history. And then I wrote Alan an email and asked him, well, can you tell me what was your father feeling in this situation? I mean, he killed a helpless old couple, so what was going through his mind?
Well, what was going through his mind was, I'm in a farmhouse of a German couple, in the dress of a German officer, but they suspect that I'm really a Jew because my accent is not good, and so you know, he didn't want to be turned in again, so he killed the old couple and took the food out of the house and went back on the road.
Well, you wrote something that he was thinking about, they were just Germans for him. And
Well,
I thought that was hard to swallow for me. But actually, when you know the history, well, it's understandable. So after that, he was he was hiding in the forest, and he didn't realize that the war is over. And then he came to some GI soldiers discovered him in the forest, and they took him to the town called Straubing, and that's how he survived. So then he was trying to track down Leah, the girl that he wanted to marry, and he couldn't find her, and he got into trouble, and then he decided to go to America because he heard that Leah also went to America, and he also had a short visit in his hometown, and he found out that the rest of his family didn't survive. Her grandmother was also taken to Auschwitz. And
Yeah, the rest of his family were gassed in Treblinka.
Yeah.
He was the youngest of 8 children, but for one brother and one sister. One sister who managed to get to Russia before the war, and one brother who also survived Auschwitz.
Yeah, that was David Ferris. So in this page you see the young Hertzko with his statue. He's holding here on a ship going to America. And when he was arriving in America, he tried to find any information about Leah, and he couldn't find anything. So what he did was that he couldn't do anything else because he didn't have education. So what he decided to do was to become a professional boxer, because that's the only thing he could do. And the other idea behind it was, when I become a professional boxer, I want to be as most famous as possible, so that my name would be big in the newspapers and big on posters on the street, so that Leah would find him. And this is actually the connection between the two parts in the story that I used in the setup of my storyline. You see here a scene where he's in the shop where he gets his equipment for boxing. He gets his boxer shorts with the Star of David on it. This is a page that you also sent me from a newspaper, and there's a report about Harry Haft. It's about new faces in the world of Oxford. There's a little review about what happened to him. I found it very funny that they, instead of writing where he came from this little town in Poland, they wrote Vienna, Austria. Yeah. It was not very well researched. So his career started quite good. He was quite a good fighter. He had a lot of energy. He didn't have very much technique, but the coaches, they were very impressed by his energy and the beating he could take. And so he was, in the beginning, he was quite successful.
Yeah, he won his first 10 fights.
Yeah. And I don't really understood why his manager gave him 2 strong opponents. Was it because Harry pushed him to to become famous more quickly? Do you remember that?
Well, it was a matter of money. You know, fighters in those days fought 100, 150 fights. Not once a year, they fought it every couple of weeks. So he did not have the best of managers, and he was a light heavyweight. And he was the light heavyweight that was enhancing the records of heavyweights, because he always fought people that were in the higher bracket.
Yeah. So he lost some of the fights. And also, what was significant of his description of the fights was that very often during the box fights he had memories back to the fights that came up in his mind when he was fighting other prisoners in the camps. And so I put those images in the description of the box fights, or memories about what happened to him in the camps. So to make those box fights more realistic, I'm not a really big fan of the box sport, and well, I don't have very much experience with that, but I wanted to make the scenes in the box ring, I wanted to make them as realistic as possible. So I went to some box events in Berlin, and sat in the audience with my sketchbook and sketched some of the fighters, which was a lot of fun. Because they were also, well, it was the first one was a box event for young boxers, and there were also some kids, and they realized what I'm doing, and they gathered around me and said, "Oh, that's me, that's me. I was meeting him up yesterday." And also, when I did the sketches, I tried to see how they behave, what they're doing, what the coach are telling the fighters, and there are a lot of details that I put from this into the story, and I think that made the story more realistic. This is a scan from one of the things that was in the package that you sent me. After his career was down, he had a lot of losses. Somebody approached to him that he could have a fight against Rocky Marciano, who was already a big name in the box world at that time. And it was very obvious that he didn't have a chance against Rocky Marciano. I didn't really understand why Rocky Marciano had this fight with him, because he was not really...
Well, if you look at Rocky Marciano's record, you'll see that probably the first 20 fights are one-round knockouts. And most of the fighters that Rocky Marciano fought were light heavyweights, were smaller than him for the first part of his career. Arthur Ellen, I thought, was important because he hypnotized my father before the fight so that my father wouldn't be afraid of Rocky Marciano, he wouldn't bleed, and that he would feel no pain from Rocky's punches when the bell rang. So the bell was like the trigger for those events to happen. And Arthur Ellen used to be an entertainer before he got involved in sports hypnotism. And he was on a very famous television program where he hypnotized a girl that they put $100,000 in bills on the table, and all she had to do was, she was sitting at the table, all she had to do was reach out and take it. And he hypnotized her not to be able to move her hands. And she wasn't able on national television to move her hands to take the money. And this was on TV. But Arthur Ellen became the first sports hypnotist. This is in the late 1940s. And a lot of sports teams and individuals use hypnotists.
He also claimed that he was responsible for the career of Tony Curtis, which is, well, you never know. But there was another idea idea that he had, because he was really desperate. He really wanted to win this fight. This was the climax of his career, his last chance to become really famous. So he was really, really desperate. He really wanted to win. So that was his first idea, and the other idea was to approach the coach of Rocky Marciano, and because he knew that this guy's family also got killed by the Nazis, and they said, well, come on, you have to help me think of our history. And so this guy gave him some tricks and gave him some advice how to fight against Rocky Marciano. So they had this huge box fight, and well, there is the story that Hertzko Haft was threatened by the mafia before the fight, so that he had to lose. Well, that was one point of the story where I don't really believe you. I mean, come on. It was Rocky Marciano, you lost, and you don't have to tell us this story. But I found out some of the details about that story that are actually true, and it's actually possible that he was really threatened. The first thing was this guy, Frank Palermo, which was actually a member of the entourage of Rocky Marciano. Then there was another part in the story where I found out they threatened him by mentioning that another fighter died in a car accident at the same night of the fight. It was Tony Pallone, I think is the name. And so I researched that name, and this story actually is true. On the same time, Tony Pallone died in a car accident. And so there's some of these stories are really there. And this is also something that I really like about telling biographical stories. When you do research and you find out some things. And I actually also found out there's this website called boxrec.com where they have all the information about box fights. And if you know the name of Hertzko Haft was there, is the record of his fight, and underneath there was his birth name, and his birth name was written Moses Friedler, and that was the name that was written on his passport, because he bought a passport from another person to come to America.
There was a waiting list to get out of a displaced persons camp and come to America. You could get to Israel real fast, but you couldn't get to America. You had to wait 3 to 6 months. So he bought somebody else's papers so he could go right away.
So well, he lost the fight and he ended his career as a boxer, and he started to work in a hat factory and to make a living, and then he met your mother. And, she was a neighbor in the house, and he phoned her. They met for this date in this restaurant, and then they married.
They were married within 1 week. He had no place to live. He was a boarder. The old lady that he boarded with died. So he moved in with my grandmother.
Yeah.
After a week.
And then they opened a vegetable shop.
In Poland, his father was a fruit and vegetable peddler. So that was his first job in the United States. He was a fruit and vegetable peddler.
Yeah. And then he opened a shop by himself.
Well, in Brooklyn, they used to have push carts. Where they used to, it would come out of a refrigerator, and they'd line up on the streets, and everybody would, up off the push cart.
Well, so then, I think it was the year 1962. 63, when Harry came to the family, he said, well, okay, we're going on a holiday.
We're going to Florida.
You want to tell this story?
He, after my bar mitzvah, he took all of my bar mitzvah money. I never saw it for my college education. He took all of my bar mitzvah points for money, and he said, well, we're going to Florida. He put everybody on a train, and he took us to Florida. Unknown to us, his family, I have a sister who's 4 years younger, and a brother who's 4 years younger than that. The town of Belcato had a society that tried to find all of the members. It's called the Belcato Society, and they actually found that Leah was living in Florida, in Miami, so they put us on a train, took us to Florida. And I will not tell you the other story. I will not go beyond that.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a very, very emotional moment. But what I wanted to know is, do you remember the moment when your father came to you and he said, "Well, can you help me finding the name of?"
We were in the Marseille Hotel, which was a kosher hotel in Miami Beach, and he knew the last name, or changed the last name, so we opened up the phone book, and of course there's a long list of people with this last name, so I had to dial and speak to everybody and try and find out is the Leah in the household. So I did. Her new husband answered the phone and said, well, she's not going to speak to anybody. Hung up the phone.
Yeah. And then
that's it.
How did you?
Well, they'd have to read your book.
You could say it first. Well, all right.
But I can tell you, as a New York City boy going out to Florida, it's the first time I saw fruit growing on trees. So it was a thrill.
Yeah, okay, so we're not going to tell you. But what we can tell is, maybe the jump in the future is...
that was my father at his induction into the National Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, which is in New York.
And well, I have some more pictures.
At age 77, this occurred in April, and he died 6 months later in November, so at least he had that experience.
Yeah, and I really like this picture. You can see in his face expression that there's a lot of emotion going on. He's really, really touched in that moment. Because well, it's something like
It was a big
something
crowd,
came
and
to
he got a
an end.
standing ovation. It was a very emotional moment for him. It was sort of the first time he was recognized for all of his suffering, because I think, and again, when Reinhard approached me to do the story, I was a little concerned because he was a German artist. He's going to, well, how is he going to portray my father, who's not necessarily who not necessarily did good things to survive, but from the perspective of the Jewish community, there's a lot more empathy. You know, what he had done, what he had went through.
How did they come across the story of Hertzko? What was it from your book?
Well, it's from my book.
And so they made the...
Yeah, my father's boxing record wasn't all that bad. He was 14-7 with 10 knockouts, and his last two fights were against the two top-rated heavyweights of that time, Roland Gustaza, who lost to Marciano twice, and Rocky Marciano. Both were heavyweights. My father was 175 pounds. The heavyweights were 190 pounds. Rocky Marciano was 186, 187. Real heavy.
This is the proclamation of where he was taken into the...
He was honored by the county that he lived in, and the United States Congress congratulated him on his induction into the Sports Hall of Fame.
And oh yeah, he died how many months later?
6 months.
6 months
after that.
Yeah.
I asked my mother to put this inscription on his grave, and the reason is when he came to the United States, when he got off the boat, he was taken in by his uncle Samuel Haft, and his Aunt Sadie. One day, when they were sitting in their apartment, there was a knock on the door, and it was Blinky Palermo, one of the mobsters, who heard that this Jewish boxer just got into town. He had just won this heavyweight, and he wanted to sign him up, which might have been a good idea for him to go with the mafia rather than with a Jewish boxing promoter, which didn't work out. But his Aunt Sadie said to him, "Harry, after all the punishment you've had, why would you want to be a boxer and have more punishment?" And he said, "Aunt Sadie, after all I've been through, what harm could a man with gloves on his hands do to me?" That was his saying. And that's sort of been a saying that has inspired me.
And I found this sentence so good that it put it in the front of the book, because it's the whole story together. So this is a sketch that I did from a photo of another boxer, because in the back of the book we have afterword from a sport journalist from Germany, and he made a report about other boxers that were imprisoned.
It's actually a very good afterword. It was
It's
very good afterward. It's written by a boxing historian, a German boxing historian,
Martin Kraus,
a German Jewish boxing historian, if I can say that. My father was not the only one boxing in the concentration camps. The Nazis organized a lot of sporting events, including boxing, for their entertainment, and he goes on to enumerate a lot of the other participants in the boxing matches in other places.
Yeah, there was one, he's quite famous in Germany, that's this guy, he's called Okuli Träumer, and he was Sinti Roma, and he won a big fight in Germany, and the Nazis took away his prize, because they said, well, you're not German enough to win this prize. And so they imprisoned him afterwards, and they killed him in a concentration camp after they were beating him to death. It's a horrible story. But he was the prize was given back to him post-mortem in, I think it was in the 80s. And now there's a boxing school named after him in Berlin.
Yes, so that's the end of my presentation of pictures. If you have any questions for us, we'd be very happy to answer them. Yeah.
I'm going to ask one. So a lot of your work is biographical. For example, you have one about Castro and one about Jonny Cash. And I'm just wondering the process of distilling a person's entire life into one novel. You're saying that there are certain stories that you were drawn to. How do you decide which to include?
It happened just by accident that I find the story interesting. I like broken characters, like Jonny Cash, for example. I did this book about Jonny Cash, and also the story of Hertzko Haft, and then I did another story about Fidel Castro, which was happening actually because I made a trip to Havana to do a travel book about Cuba, and then I also did research about Fidel Castro, but he's also a personality that has a dark side and a positive side. So that's always what interests me about persons, and where I want to do biographical comic about. And also I like to touch historical themes and like the Holocaust or the revolution in Cuba, and right now I'm working on a story about the Somalian sports girl that's touching the theme of migration from Africa. So that's some of the reasons why I pick persons from the history and turn those stories into graphic novels.
Yeah. A question to Mr. Haft. Graphic novels. How did you perceive graphic novels before your father's life was turned into one? Did you take it as a serious means of artistic expression? Because
that is a very good question, because I was very happy that Reinhard found my book. Because my book was published by a university. It didn't get marketed. It's not on any bookshelves. Universities publish books for use in classrooms. My book had no use in classrooms, so it got very little exposure. I was so happy that Reinhard picked up the book, because now the story of my father can be spread a lot further than I was able to spread it. So that was my motivating reason. But did I know anything about graphic novels before? No, I only knew about Marvel Comics and the Superman and the supernatural heroes that were made into movies from graphic novels. So it was a new experience. I didn't think that graphic novels had that kind of important content to them. But my primary purpose was spreading the story. And so I was happy that a graphic novel would be a way for more people to read it, and not only people who were just interested in some narrow field, but as a comic book, it's accessible to a lot of people. The story reads very well on people. I sat down and I read the story, and I was just amazed at how well the story reads.
Thank you.
Yes.
You have two younger siblings, right?
Yes.
So did you speak with them about your father, and did you compare their experience, how they saw your father? Do they have the same?
My sister, who's 4 years younger, unfortunately, somebody came up to her at a cocktail party and asked her, because the book had been published, and asked her about the book. And she didn't know he was a reporter for a magazine. And she said, well, I hated my father. He was a cruel and abusive man. And boom, appeared in the newspaper. My younger brother didn't have as the first child, you're always the brunt of everything. As a girl coming 4 years later, she saw the abuse, and I was always fighting my entire life for my father's love, and I did everything I could during my adult life to get it. But my sister really didn't care. As far as she was concerned, he was a cruel and abusive man. Why are we tolerating him? Why is my mother still there? She's such an abused woman. Why is she still there? Jamie, do you want to say anything on that subject?
I guess I just feel like I wonder what Aunt Helene felt as a woman growing up in that household with such male force, and she once shared that she was afraid of him. And I just have the image at his funeral of her collapsing, and so I do think.
Yes, and I asked her son, why did she collapse? What was such an emotional upon his death? She didn't care about him at all. Why would she faint and collapse? And he said, I think it's more relief than grief. And then after his death, there was other stories that came out about, a cousin. He brought his sister from Israel over to the United States, when he made some money. There were stories that came out very much later that he abused his sister's teenage daughter, during the course of their stay at my house when they came to America. So, my father was not what we call, a great person was hard.
But none of you really realized this trauma, right?
Oh, of
Actually,
course.
until the very end, you never knew what was really behind
Well,
it.
you knew, well, of course, he had the numbers I was on, you heard snippets, and of course he told my mother, all the stories, and then you read things about the Holocaust, and of course, I remember as a kid, everybody glued to the TV sitting in front of the Nuremberg trials, and just hearing a little bit of the snippets of what was going on, just from seeing what they were saying in the Nuremberg trials. But it's not something that you, as a kid growing up in America, that you want to embody. I mean, that's not. It's so foreign to you when you have a parent like that. And I don't know what more to say, on that subject. But my younger brother, who's 9 years younger, sort of escaped all of that, in a sense.
Do you have any good memories about your father?
Oh, of course. Yeah, they're always good. My father wasn't the type of person that, played ball with me or anything, but I do have good memories. There were fairly good times. It wasn't all bad, but you never knew at a Thanksgiving dinner when he would, suddenly lose his mind. Or how many people experience seeing a swastika? I mean, you've seen it, right? You see it, in the course of your life, you see it. When my father sees a swastika, his mind goes blank, and all hell breaks loose. And you can see, he went into a library, and he saw, the rise and fall of the Third Reich, with swastika. He disappeared for a day, after that. Just certain things triggered, a loss of mind, to him. And, either it was violent, or he was jumping out a window, or my sister dated a Gentile, and he broke every window in the house and tried to jump out the third floor, stuff like that.
So I can ask you,
Yeah.
in spite of your dad, how did you, what kind of a career did you have, education did you have, what did you do yourself?
I went to Kingsborough Community College, which was free in New York City. Then I matriculated into Queens College, which was free in New York City. And then to escape my house, I got married. Okay, took all my wedding presents and went to a graduate school in counseling psychology in Richmond, Virginia, and then went to law school at the University of Miami, which I will say, my wife put me through law school. We're married 41 years, and I'm very grateful. But marriage was the way out for a lot of people under those circumstances. Yes?
In my family, one of the adults that were about the age of your father and you was also abusive to other family members. It was very difficult for me because I grew up in a very loving, open house to understand why that was going on. And he would even slap children that were visiting if he was upset about their behavior. So how did you explain to your children, and how did you kind of protect them or shield them from that aspect of his behavior?
Jake? How are you protected from my father's crazy behavior?
From you, I think it was just remarkable that you raised us. We went to Disney World a lot. We lived in Florida, and I just.
Well, I can tell a story. You just triggered something. I got married. Hooked the U-Haul up to my father-in-law's car, and I was going to go from New York. I was going to go to school in Richmond, Virginia, and as we're driving over the Verrazano Bridge, which leaves New York to go to New Jersey, I told Gail, my wife, to look back because she will never see New York again. And it was true. She never saw New York again because we went to Richmond, Virginia, then I went to Miami. And I spent 30 years in Florida, and now I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So that was a way. That was to distance myself. and distance my family. And I raised my kids in Florida, and they're Disneyland kids. You know, and when they got out of Florida, they saw there was real hardship in the world. It was problems for them.
And I feel like you've actually felt conflicted about me being part of learning the story because you wanted to protect my generation from hearing the horrors.
Right. My son wants nothing to do with it. I don't think he may have read my book, but he's never seen a Holocaust movie. He just refuses to make that connection. My daughter has wanted to share the cultural experience, but I wasn't comfortable. I was trying to say, well, the Holocaust is going to end with me. I was the last survivor of the Holocaust. I don't want, you know, although she's seen some of the behaviors of my father, I don't want her to have any bad experiences from it. Yeah. Yes?
Hi, it's Haft. You said that you left New York, but after going through the experience with your, talked about your father and published the book, so how do you feel personally when you go back to New York, like to visit? Like, do you feel different now after that experience?
You know, I rarely go back to New York. I neglected to go back for every single bar mitzvah of my cousins because I didn't want to go back to New York. But I made a promise that I would go to every wedding, and I've kept that promise. So I do go back to New York.
But do you see it different now after publishing the book and understand the mother's story?
I see and understand why he was who he was, and I have compassion and love for my father, unlike, I would say, my sister, because it just raises a question, to me, what would you do? What would I do? What kind of person would I have become if I spent 5 years in concentration camps? A lot of the survivors never spent that much time. You know, I don't know, you know, I've looked at a lot of the literature. I haven't seen any survivors that have spent 5 years in concentration camps. You know, so if you're spending 5 years from the age of 16 to 21, what kind of person can you be? What kind of parent could you be? You know, so in the end, you know, Jenny will tell you, I did everything I could in the last 10 years of my father's life, you know, to win his love and to reconcile. However, I remember one time my mother-in-law, who had Alzheimer's, was in diapers, and I mentioned it to my father that my mother-in-law was now, and he thought I was telling him that he's going to be in diapers. And he took his cane and he raised it, and he said, I should have killed you long ago. And he tried to hit me with his cane. So.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we started so fast and with fascinating insights by Alan Haft, we didn't really have the chance to introduce our event this afternoon. I'm Uwe Rau, I'm the director of the Goethe-Institut here in Toronto, the German Cultural Center. I'm extremely glad that so many of you showed up this sunny afternoon on Mother's Day. Thank you so much, Reinhard Kleist, for being here. Reinhard Kleist is our guest at the Toronto Comic Artist Festival at the moment. And that was fascinating to listen to you when I talked to my colleagues before, and we discussed the possibility that you would be able to come. And you just told me before we started that you came up to Canada because you visited your daughter, who was a student at Syracuse University, and Toronto is not that far from Syracuse. So for me it was, and I think I can speak on behalf of all the people in the audience, it was a fascinating afternoon. It was emotionally difficult, I guess for many people, your direct personal experiences, and then Reinhard's explanation how he tried to transcend it artistically in a graphic novel. And I'm very glad also that our Consul General Stechel is with us. And I'm also glad for the question you asked, how is it appropriate to produce a graphic novel with a content like that, if I may say so, and you gave the very best answer. Just for information, we had also mentioned on our website this novel, The Boxer, was awarded several times. It got the award for the best German book last year, and also the Grand Prix de Lyon. And I think it is the very, very best means to spread the story, to make it public, and to be able to let these things are reflected and then repeat anymore. We were, just a brief note aside, Goethe-Institut and the Consul General, we were very closely in Toronto with our Jewish partners. We are also active in the Holocaust Education Week and the Jewish Film Festival has just finished. So it's an honor and privilege for us to organize these events, and I'm really happy it turned out the way it did. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also want to say that there are copies of the book that are available right here, and big thanks to TCAF and to the Miles Mandel Jewish Community Center for helping us make this event possible. We're also raffling off a copy of the book that was signed by Reinhard, so if you haven't entered, please enter and go get it.
And by the way, I learned of a tradition at this comic festival. When you buy a book from the author is there to sign it, the comic artist will do a little sketch for you.
And plus, you can read the end of the story.